Hey everyone, welcome back to Tuesday Tea with me, Alisha Bowker Mudrock. Today I have Dez on the show. I'm so excited to speak with her just about continuing this theme of how we're embracing this new year. I know some of us, we've talked about, are feeling already tired a few weeks in, and some are still like riding that high, and there's a lot of energy. So she has tons of wisdom, especially around finances and mindset and a number of other things that I'm so excited for her to share with us on how to really just capitalize on the next 11 months and beyond and really continue to grow and step into our power. So welcome. So excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, and I guess I could just share a little bit about kind of who I am
Yes, yes, please.
and some of my background. My name is Dez Valdez. I live on Ohlone land in otherwise known as Oakland, California. And I use she, her pronouns. I identify as queer and Mexican. I'm also Mexican American. And I am a licensed clinical social worker in private practice and also an organizational consultant supporting nonprofit mental health organizations with building programming and strengthening training and all of that. And wanting to create more educational offerings and particularly around and related to money trauma.
Mm.
And so it's been a passion that I have found a couple of years ago that came out of my own personal experiences with money. And, one good thing that came out of a traumatic experience with money was that I found a passion around it. And I am out to share that with others. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I love this because I think that money is something we just don't talk about very often, especially in the therapy world. I mean, I know some professions are built on money, but I also wonder how much money is even talked about sometimes in those money fields, right? Like our own money, not just the money you're trading for someone or whatever else. So I would just love to kind of hear more. I know we could probably talk a million things. So I guess a
Yeah.
door that feels natural for you to open up, but just diving a little bit more into like what does that even look like, or what are maybe a place we could start just on like thinking about money and trauma and our relationship with it sort of in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So I 100% agree with you. We are told not to talk about money. We're told not to share how much we make with others, particularly in workplaces. And it's just a really stigmatized subject. And, you know, for me, I really believe that not talking about money keeps us oppressed. It takes away things like our collective power,
Mm-hmm.
like salary
Mm-hmm.
negotiations, all of that.
Yeah.
And and yeah, it can create a lot of like shame and judgment, criticism, all of those things. And so it's incredibly important. That's part of why I do this work is to encourage people, destigmatize and talk about money and hopefully in like a shame-free way and create spaces for people to feel more comfortable talking about money. It's incredibly important. Money touches every part of our lives. And,
Perfect.
a lot of my focus right now is working with other therapists to kind of heal their relationship with
Mm.
money so they can build
Mm.
more sustainable practices.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this work, money trauma work, working on financial anxiety, all of those things really applies to everybody.
Yeah.
And we, what we're doing in financial therapy, or people who are kind of working with healing kind of this emotional side of money is really applying everything we know about trauma, shame, scarcity, anxiety, et cetera, to money. And
Hmm.
that can really be, it's almost like it's like we're creating new links in our minds around
Hmm.
how to talk about money and
Mm-hmm.
how we feel about money. And it's just a new way of talking about it, or newer way of
Yeah.
talking about it. Not to say that
Yeah.
no one's talking about it, but not enough of us are.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, just really passionate about that piece of it, is we just need to be talking about it more and yeah, releasing the stigma and shame around it.
What are some of the top things that you've maybe personally experienced or seen just from working with clients that were like those top, what's the word I'm looking for, barriers or consequences of continuing to live in the the more shame, like I don't have a great comfortable relationship with money. Like what happens if we don't start talking about it, or if we don't address it in the ways you're kind of alluding to?
Yeah, if we don't talk about it and if we don't address the kind of emotional side of it, I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just going to continue to hold us back. It's going to hold us back from building wealth. It's going to keep people in positions of power that
Mm.
maybe we aren't values aligned with. And so it's incredibly important for us to build wealth, particularly marginalized communities, particularly people in the healing professions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if we don't, we're staying status quo, and we're not really doing the work that maybe we intended to be doing. Going back to like our why of we do this work, right, is to kind of
Yeah.
help people heal themselves and therefore healing our communities, et cetera. So, you know, some of the barriers that, can come to mind right now, when it comes to people even approaching their money, is that strong messaging that we receive, but also, you know, we can internalize things around,
Mm.
whether or not we're good or bad with money. We
Mm.
can feel a lot of like self-judgment around our finances. And so all of this comes from like a shame place.
Yeah.
Um, and, you know, let me give one example too. I mean, again, I know your audience isn't all therapists, but I feel like this is
Oh,
related to
yeah.
service providers. I hear this a lot around, and I've said this, I don't get into this field for
For
money.
the money. Uh-huh.
Exactly. And, we get into this field because it's values aligned for us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, how do we resource ourselves? And money not being the only resource, but an important one because we live under this system of capitalism.
Yep.
And so we have to learn to swim
We
in it.
need it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so yeah, I think part of the work is kind of unlearning those things, that money is
Mm-hmm.
bad. I mean, if you put it in the wrong hands, people can do bad things with it, but money in and of itself is not inherently bad. It's,
Mm-hmm.
what we do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just like to talk about this piece around, we need more money in the hands of people who care about and are helping other people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that requires building that confidence around money. It requires healing our relationship with money, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
like maybe we avoid our finances altogether
Mm-hmm.
because it's scary, or,
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we, overspend, or maybe we
Mm-hmm.
underspend. Maybe we,
Mm-hmm.
in my own personal experience, the what my past experiences of scarcity did did and still has an impact, is it caused me to be excessively risk averse with my
Yeah.
finances.
Yeah.
And it caused me to keep my money because I felt like, oh, if I invested or things like that, or do things to take
Mm-hmm.
risks with it, then that's terrifying. I'm going to lose it
Mm-hmm.
all. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's just a lot to unpack, and I feel like there's so many threads we can go down and so many different examples of what comes up for people.
Yes.
And it does start with just naming, like, there is an emotional side of money, and
Mm-hmm.
financial literacy isn't always enough. It's a piece of it,
Of
but
course.
it's like
It's
it's how
not,
we
it's a
feel
small,
about
small
it.
part of it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
Now, as you're speaking, it comes to mind, definitely grew up with more fiscally conservative parents, which I'm very grateful for because we always had enough and got to do things. And, it was great to not feel like as a kid stress around money. I'm sure there was who doesn't have it, but like that was that. But as an adult, I remember being at the airport one time and being like, oh, but I don't want to buy the $12 sandwich, but I was so hungry and I had $12. And I was like, no, I'm like breaking this pattern of we don't buy food at airports because it's like too expensive when I'm hungry and it's fine. And it was something like from my childhood, right? Like we traveled, you didn't get food at airports or you didn't get the appetizer, you just got your meal and a water. And my husband and I always joke because we had similar things. And now we're like, give us the bottle of wine and the apps. It's like our like, fuck you to now to this
Mm-hmm.
like stupid rules
Totally.
that like again, because we are thankfully in a position where we can afford that comfortably. It's not going to put us in debt and we
Mm-hmm.
feel fine about having the things. But it's in these tricky little ways. I feel like these weird rules or associations or internalizations, whether that's what our parents were like telling us or not telling us,
Hmm.
but how we sort of picked up on things. And I think it is what you've just carried in without thinking about it. And then what you're intentionally choosing to continue or leave behind. But then also when you maybe go to that backlash extreme of like, well, I'm just going to do it because I wasn't allowed to, even if that's not like, is that the best choice or is that the choice you really want to be making? So even in just those little examples around food and money and going out, eating out, there's so many things that already come up that I've like low key unpacked and thought of. I haven't formally gone through like therapy for it, but just like that comes to mind when you're talking about how much is sort of stored up in this one tiny word.
Yeah, yeah. We carry a lot of money experiences with us, even if it's not conscious,
Mm-hmm. Right.
because again, like we haven't lived a life without money.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
or some form of,
Yeah.
currency, so, but you're really speaking to, how we each have our unique money stories and experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and they shape us in different ways. And even if some of us had a similar money experience growing up or a similar money trauma that may have happened, it can also get like expressed in our own unique way.
Yeah.
And part of the work or one of the outcomes is kind of really identifying, okay, how do I want to relate with money? What's important to me? What does my own rich life actually mean? It doesn't
Exactly.
necessarily mean I need to have millions or billions of dollars. There's like other resources that we can be rich in, including
Mm-hmm.
connection and time and energy. Our health is a
Mm-hmm.
big one. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not just around money, but money, one of the reframes is that money is a tool to access some of these other things. And if we, don't know how to use that tool in a way that's aligned with us, then it's much more difficult, more barriers, can
Yes.
happen to these other things that we're trying to resource ourselves with. And so I really see it, and again, this might sound obvious that it's a resource or a tool, but there's so much emotion wrapped up with it, and
Yes.
that can hold us back from using it in the ways that actually are in alignment with what we want, how we want to be living our lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just, for me, it's become a passion of mine for so many reasons. But one of them, is like, okay, I've done a lot of my own healing work around money trauma over the last couple of years. And, it's encouraged me to kind of like step into my own power.
Mm-hmm.
And, use it in a way that, pushes me towards just what I value in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one thing I also want to add here too, because I think this is really common, especially people in the healing professions, you know, it's back to this concept of like money being bad, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily the money itself. It's maybe things we don't agree with aspects of capitalism because we know how much harm has been caused on our
Right.
communities, especially if we come from marginalized communities. And
Right.
so it's really important that we do this work. And some of that work is externalizing and looking at the systemic barriers. Some of that work is, our own histories and experiences,
Mm-hmm.
with, money trauma, scarcity, all of that. So it can kind of like almost liberate us and free us and be able to kind of
Mm.
believe in ourselves and build that confidence of like, I got this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there are things that are for me. Retirement is for me, it's possible. Or
Mm. Yes.
asking for a raise is for me, it's possible. Or
Right.
raising my fees as a service provider, that's okay.
Right.
It's okay to do that.
Right.
I need to do that to sustain myself so I can do the work that I
Right.
want to be
Right.
doing and have the impact that I want to have.
Yeah.
So,
Or charging that no show or late fee or taking that vacation
yeah.
and time off. Like so many things that I think folks, especially in our profession and other work with a lot of like teachers, nurses, like other helping professions. And I think it's a similar struggle. And you get into that work not for the money, but because you want to help people, which
Hmm.
not to say that isn't true, but I can't live on the satisfaction of helping someone either,
Yeah.
and so there has to be room for both for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something that you mentioned kind of when you said how money is a tool to help us with our vision, and something we've been talking about in previous weeks, and something I talk a lot about too, is just living within alignment and being clear on where we're headed and sort of what those big vision, overarching goals are. And I love this intersect, if your vision or your values and the things that you're, striving for are to, like a good work-life balance, or to travel and see the world or connect with other places, people, and things, or to be able to provide for your parents who helped you or your kids or whoever else. We all of those require money, right? Like,
Hmm.
and so I do think it is the piece where we have these vision boards or even our value system, and sometimes still the financial piece, like it's like implied because obviously, but it still isn't a thing that's also on the list of the step-by-step goals, or how we're categorizing our Q1 goals to get there, or how we're framing our alignment with vision, where other things might be happening, but also am I still putting away that money that I need to get to the trip, not just doing these things? Or am I still, I don't know, whatever, how do I feel about this piece? Or am I raising my fees, or whatever else? So that just kind of struck as a piece that, again, it's always sort of in there, but
Hmm.
I don't know how often I see that like specifically on a vision board, or that specifically talked to about as a value, or even in the SMART goals or the little things, as comfortably or as obviously as I think it should be, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, if also, something's coming to mind around like
Yeah,
if we say we value money, that can easily, we can get a lot of
person.
pushback for that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I get it. Like I get it. I am a social worker. I come from marginalized communities. I grew up low income, all of it. And a lot of my work has been in community mental health. Like I get it. You know, it's like bad to say I value money. And like, again, you're not saying I value this piece of paper. You're not saying I value capitalism. You're not saying these
Right.
things, but it's like, I value this resource so it can allow me to move forward in my life and, not just survive, but
Mhm.
move into thriving and help other people in the ways that I want to. And so, for me personally, these last couple of years, I've really had to like unfuck my relationship with money and like
Yeah,
really
yeah.
and it's not easy work because we're talking about money trauma. We're talking about trauma. When we're talking about money, we're
Right.
often
Which is
talking about trauma.
never easy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, it's not easy work. It's why financial therapy exists. And,
Mhm.
but I needed to do that so I can do the things I want to be doing. So if we're talking about vision, and I think that's one takeaway here is that like, what are the resources that we need to be able to fulfill our visions and our passion and,
Right.
the good that we want to do in the world. And
Right.
I was holding I mean, I say this lightly, but like holding myself back in a way by not kind of um, addressing, my money anxiety and my
Yeah.
fear and my scarcity mindset and all of
Yeah.
that. And so over these last 2 years doing a lot of that work, like it has unlocked so much
Mm.
motivation and drive towards these bigger things that I want to be doing and
Mm.
expanding my business, building my business out and henceforth making more money, but being able so I can live a life that I want to live and support people that I want to support. So
Yeah.
yeah, if that's one takeaway, I mean that's it's part of the work. And even if again, if it's not conscious, like again, like money touches all of us, like we can't
Yep.
ignore it. And even
Yep.
people who grew up with a lot of wealth have a complicated relationship with money, a lot of
Yes.
guilt and shame, and all of that can
Yes.
come up. And
Yes.
so it's not just people who didn't have resources, it's people
Mm-mm.
who do,
Mm-hmm.
so we all,
Mm-hmm.
again, all have our unique money experiences. But, for me, and I know one of the things that, you talk about is like your year review, your vision, all of that, and like how to build confidence and everything. And for me, this has been like a really big piece, especially as
Mm.
a business owner,
Mm.
is to
No,
work
definitely.
through that.
And I can resonate with that. I think sometimes when I think of the biggest pieces of myself getting in my own way, it does come back to some of like the tension around money, and not necessarily not having it, but feeling like I have something of value to charge for that much, or that I could ask that of people, or that, what that all would mean or entail is because in my coaching business, so therapy, I still take insurance. So I just like bitch about it because someone else tells me how much I should make, and it's always not enough. So
Yeah.
it feels like there's an enemy there, right? It's not me.
Yeah.
But on the coaching side, it's, figuring out packages or things I want to do, and not selling my time and energy and expertise and self short, but having a lot of like interesting feelings that come up around like what would a $4,000 coaching package look like? And I'm like, huh? Like what? That's for someone
Hmm.
else to, right? So it's like or beyond. So I think like
Yeah.
it has been a piece I've definitely been on my mind a lot more in a new way, starting this second business and playing around with it in a different landscape. Not that it can't be similar in the therapy world too, but there's just
Hmm.
more freedom in some stuff you can offer,
Yeah.
how you can offer things on that side. And so, yeah, it's been on my mind as well. And I've tried to be more intentional at
Yeah.
putting it in my goals. Like it's even one of my Q1 goals is like I want to make this much a month, and like being able to say those things and put those things into the world for myself and not feel fear or anxiety or shame or what, like not do the avoidance dance I do where like I always know what's happening, but I never want to look at my bank account, or my husband wants to like check everything every day. And I'm like, oh, I would literally like, I
Hmm.
would admit that's too much. That'd be too hard, And he's like, what if someone's using your card? I'm like, I don't know. I'll figure it out on the end of the month when I look at it. Right. So it is this very interesting, like subtle ways we've learned to live with the anxiety or the stress or the trauma of it that doesn't seem so overtly bad or like hurting us. But when it gets
Hmm.
poked, I definitely can tell when it comes up, and my like kind of gut response to like random shit. It's not like it,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no reason like logically for it, but it's just like I don't want to know. Like it's all happening. Things are getting paid, so I don't need to know all the details.
Totally. Sometimes it's more easy to ignore or avoid, but of course it's not sustainable. So
No,
yeah.
no. And I can like buckle
Yeah.
down when I have to, but I'm like, this is like a lot of back and forth. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
what would you say? And I know this probably, obviously, there's a lot to it, but as like a couple first steps for someone who's like, oh, I haven't really thought about this, or like, yeah, things you guys are saying are like really hitting me. What's like some of the first step or two that someone can sort of do in their own space to begin to kind of even examine or unpack this these types of relationships? Like if we're not necessarily in the therapy room yet, but are there little things we can
Yeah.
kind of start to do or think about on our own related?
Yeah. I mean, one of the first things, and again, not to say this is easy and that it won't bring up these feelings, anxiety, fear, all of it, but it's just to kind of ask yourself, what is your earliest money experience? And it might take a second for that to come, and it might come up in a different way. Like for me, my earliest money related experience is actually having food scarcity, like
Right.
consciously remembering that or knowing as a young kid in elementary school that I didn't have enough food for lunch compared to the kid sitting next to me, and so it's not money, and I didn't have the language for that, but I knew what it felt like.
Right.
I
Right.
knew what it felt like to be in scarcity around food, and scarcity has a similar impact on the brain as trauma does. And so it's just like,
Right.
yeah, I vividly remember what that felt like, and
Mm,
so, yeah, that's like a starting place often is like, what's your earliest money experience? And like, often people can think of something and they could then elaborate on like how that has like carried
hit
on in
them
their,
now.
yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And how it shows up. Like for me, how
Hmm.
scarcity shows up, even when I'm not in actual scarcity anymore,
Right. But
but
your brain's still
perceives
like, what if?
exactly
Yeah.
perceived scarcity has the same impact of real scarcity. And so that's just a starting place. And I say that also, it's just like take care of yourself as you're thinking about these things, but
Yeah.
it's an important starting place. And I'd like to say like start talking about money, just talk about it. It is not that easy, but
Right.
just noticing,
Okay.
and getting curious about it, and like trying to make that connection that money is emotional. It's not just,
Yeah.
a tangible asset. It's like a very emotional thing for us. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say that's a starting place. And there's so much more.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yeah.
No,
Uh-huh.
I love that. And I like that permission slip to have grace and to also just like get more curious, because
Mhm.
I do think that it's a great starting place for anything. But it's also like we don't have to fix it or change it, or isn't necessarily good or
Yeah.
bad. It's just okay, I know I hate like a profit and loss statement sounds like the death of me, even though
Hmm.
I am making profit, but I don't want to touch that, right? For whatever reason. I don't need to change it or totally understand it, but like that causes me a feeling and I can know that, right? And I can continue to do more there. Or this feels super comfortable. I'll tell you all day, like number. I don't mind like sharing things if people want to know. That's a way maybe I've reclaimed something. So I know that about myself. For other people, maybe not, right? So it's, but I do think having that awareness, even if I'm not ready to like dive all the way in, or even if someone's
Hmm.
not doesn't even know maybe yet what the next step is, but the more awareness we have, then the more intentional we still are in the avoidance or in the
Yeah.
embracing, which causes us to sort of be pushed to something eventually versus living in that ignorance, which can last for however long, but it might be holding us back or causing a barrier for some, causing a number of issues in itself too. So,
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Hmm.
and as we're sort of winding down here, oh, I actually had one other question. Do you
Yeah.
work with couples as well? Because I'm so curious how that would be such a totally other conversation of two people with their own money stuff talking about money together. Or do you do more like individual work solely?
Yeah, it's a good question. I personally, like, even pre adding financial therapy as a specialty in my practice, I have found over time, like, often I love doing work with individuals who are in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But so there is so much work to be done between couples, families, thruples, all of it, right?
Yeah.
Around money. And so that is, I don't personally do it right now. I'm considering creating something to support people in relationships.
Yeah.
Um, but right now, most of my work is individual, but there are people who specifically focus on that. And it's such a necessary, a necessary thing,
Necessary.
especially when, all the people involved have like different past money experiences, or they relate with money differently, or they
Yes.
spend differently, or they
Yes.
save differently, or they,
Yes.
all it's so critical.
Yeah.
But a lot of that work is also that internal work of like,
Of
ooh,
course. Right.
how do I,
Be more of your
how am I
individual
showing up in
thing.
the relationship? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that just crossed
Hmm.
my mind because I know it's like what one of the top reasons relationships don't survive if you're married, like for divorce or probably
Hmm.
breaking up, whatever else, or the biggest fights. I feel like it's always one of the top, the number in the top three of like the root cause of those things usually. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And again, our society doesn't talk about money enough. So it's almost like built in. It's
Yes.
like
Yes.
organically just happens that like,
Uh-huh.
people in relationships don't really love talking about money. And there's some people who do, but like a lot of people don't. So
Right.
it
Right.
can, yeah, cause a lot of problems.
So interesting. It's such a, I don't know, I'm just thinking, like it's such a broad topic. Like there's so many ways that my brain like immediately is like all
Yeah.
the things once you start talking about it. And it's just wild how it permeates
Yeah. And that's how
so
I feel
much.
all the time. I feel very passionate about, money trauma and all that. And whenever I get in conversation about it, I get so excited. And then my brain fires in so many
Yeah.
directions. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I feel you.
Yeah. Cause even here, I'm like sharing all these rant, but I'm like, these things are just coming up. Oh yeah, and that and that.
Uh-huh.
So it's just
Yeah.
funny how, it's not your traditional, just the like more blanket ways we think about money over there. Like
Hmm.
when it's about us, it is such a
Yeah.
dynamic, multi-layered conversation. So
Yeah.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for facilitating and like bringing in all this incredible knowledge.
Mm.
What might be one last thing you want to kind of leave folks with, either in summary or a new like nugget of wisdom for us? You've given us a lot, but like kind of like an ending
Yeah.
parting words.
I think I'm just going to say it again. I also just made a post about this. So it's really at top of mind. We
Yeah.
need more money in the hands of people who care about people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And that, me even saying that, we can unpack that all day long as to the why.
Yeah.
Um, but we
No.
do need more money in the hands of people in the helping professions, and marginalized communities and all of it. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I encourage everybody to kind of think about that and sit with that, and again, get curious about like, why, get curious about money. So Yeah.
I love that. I actually saw that post that you posted earlier and I've been thinking about it. It stuck with me, like when I
Mm-hmm.
scrolled past it. So I think it's a really poignant statement. And I'm on my soapbox about it a lot. Maybe I don't say it in those words, but yes, all the time when this system isn't working because of like it all comes down to
Mm-hmm.
similar things. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. That could be a whole talk for another day. But
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here today. What are some ways folks could connect with you, or if there anything specific you want to share, or let people know that you're offering, if they're interested in diving in deeper with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my if you want to keep up with some of my stuff, my Instagram handle is at Dez Valdez. My website is, dezvaldeslcsw.com right now. That website includes all my therapy stuff. And so if you're interested in that, but also there's a training in there for therapists healing their relationships with money. And then I also do consulting stuff. So you can find more information about me on my website and also on Instagram. And there's also a little freebie in my Instagram link. It's kind of a financial trauma checklist to get you thinking
Mm,
about these things.
okay.
But yeah, and if you're a therapist, Money Healing for Therapists is a course that I created. It's kind of a mini course, so it's not this massive commitment, but it's all on demand and puts a lot of language to this stuff, particularly for service providers. So yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope everyone has a great week, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.